Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Indexes are moving lower following Nvidia's earnings. Nvidia down about 3% at the time of recording this video. We're going to get into the earnings here, give you all the details, some of the good, some of the bad, and what could come next for markets with this kind of an earnings. Now, we still need to hear from Jensen Huang on the conference call to explain a little bit of what is going on here, because it is really a little bit of a mixed bag when it comes to Nvidia earnings, which is not the typical Nvidia earnings, to say the least. So we're going to get into that, your Tesla stock news, all of the broader market news today as well. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already, and let's get started. So first and foremost, again, we want to hear from Jensen Huang before you draw any conclusions, okay, from this report. But Nvidia's Q2 revenue came in at 46.7 billion versus estimates of 46.23 billion. That does not sound like Nvidia-like earnings. Barely beating. Like, beating a $500 million beat is basically a miss when it comes to Nvidia. Okay, now here's the strange part, I guess. Q3 revenue is expected to be 54 billion plus or minus 2%. So like a week, again, these are Nvidia standards here, like a weak Q2, but this guidance does seem very strong. So we want a little bit of clarity on that. It's most likely the reflection of the $8 billion hit or so from the China, export controls on semiconductors. And Nvidia said like a week or two ago that they were still going to recognize that on earnings. So that could be part of it. And then obviously getting some of those restrictions lifted. Maybe that's where you're getting the higher guidance. Now, Nvidia says they have not assumed any H200 shipments to China in its outlook. So that guidance doesn't even include China, which honestly, that sounds really good and likely why Nvidia is bouncing quite a bit. It was down like 6% at one of the lower points. Now it's only down like 1.5%. So kind of saying there could be upside to that guidance. Now, Nvidia has also approved an additional $60 billion share buyback. EPS came in at $1.05 versus estimates of $1.01. Nvidia also says that no H200 sales to China based customers in Q2. So the numbers were, again, not due to China at all. And presumably, again, getting that business back could lead to further upside in future earnings. And that's why I would imagine Nvidia bounced back a little bit. But again, we're going to have to see on the conference call. Like, that's what is going to make all of the difference, whether Nvidia is down 7% tomorrow or positive. And unfortunately, we don't have many other details to go over in regards to Nvidia earnings. But honestly, so far, what it looks like to me is there was a little bit of a headwind, probably from, tariffs and the export controls. But it seems like that going ahead is no longer a big issue, and I could actually see markets taking this earnings as really good, even though, again, you didn't get that typical like huge beat from Nvidia. They did give you pretty crazy guidance for Q3 and are signaling there's upside to that guidance even. So this is definitely, again, as I predicted, not the dagger in the coffin for the AI trade. It's kind of an indication that we're just getting started with the AI trade. So Nvidia earnings, at least so far before the conference call, doesn't change the thesis at all on AI. In fact, it likely strengthens that thesis. Fitch Ratings today says North America midstream growth opportunities are driven by AI data centers. Also in the news today, Google is training an AI model that could run on Apple's servers, per the information. Polish minister says the U.S. may boost the number of troops in Poland. The EU is considering secondary sanctions to hit Russia's war effort. Denmark has summoned the top U.S. diplomat after the national broadcaster reported that at least 3 people with connections to President Donald Trump have been carrying out covert influence operations in Greenland. U.S. Treasury Secretary Bessent says there are 11 strong Fed chair candidates. After Labor Day, we'll start interviews and present a short list to Trump. And Trump today has imposed secondary tariffs on imports from India to penalize the country for buying oil from Russia. According to a Fed outlook, a September cut is in focus. Futures still price a Fed cut next month, with 21.8 basis points implied for September, 34.9 basis points for October, and 55.8 basis points by December. So you're actually pricing in more than 2 rate cuts by December, although surely not a guarantee. You are pricing in more than 50 basis points of cuts by December. New York Fed's Williams called the September meeting, quote, live, while Governor Waller is expected Friday to back a 25 basis point cut. Next week's jobs report will be key. Further labor weakness would likely seal an easing, even if CPI on September 11th runs hot. NATO Secretary General Rutte says Russia and China are preparing for confrontation with the U.S., expanding their defense industries. Brazil's Haddad says Brazil will challenge tariffs in the U.S. courts, but not through lobbying. Fortune has said that there is, quote, noticeable drops in traffic at restaurants, shops, and malls. Fewer people traveling or eating out, increased coupon clipping, and price sensitivity. And this data from Fortune is echoed by other major economic institutions. Recent reports from the National Restaurant Association show a net decline in customer traffic for the 5th consecutive month. Similarly, analysts at Morgan Stanley have predicted a slowdown in consumer spending growth, projecting it to fall from 5.7% to 3.7% in 2025. White House senior advisor Hassett on Fed Cook says the honorable thing to do would be to take leave. Fed Williams says the Fed could reduce interest rates and still be somewhat restrictive. Fed Williams says if neutral is 1% or a bit below, we are restrictive right now. And he says if the economy evolves as expected, at some point interest rates need to be closer to neutral. Fed Williams says, I am watching services inflation carefully. Williams says progress on inflation is very slow now. It's hard to separate out tariff impacts. Fed Williams says weaker job growth is tied to both slowing demand and slowing supply growth. He says, I still think the labor market is solid. But he says there is definitely a slowdown in the pace of hiring. Fed Williams says the economy is growing, maybe 1 to 1.5% annual rate. He says GDP growth has slowed. I expect that to continue. U.S. Treasury Secretary Bessent says the AI boom may show up in productivity as soon as Q1 2026. Bessent says we will surely know Trump's Fed chair pick in the fall. Bessent says that delisting China companies hasn't been on the table yet. Bessent says with each China meeting, they are moving the ball forward. And Bessent says that Canada was willing to join secondary tariffs. Bessent says the U.S. government could take stakes in other areas like shipbuilding. Bessent says a U.S. stake in Nvidia seems not on the table. That's because Bessent says he doesn't think Nvidia needs financial support, which, yeah, that's true. Bessent says, I guess we will meet China's vice premier late October to maybe early November. And Bessent says, we see Fannie and Freddie deal news sometime in September and early November. If you guys don't know, Fannie and Freddie are gonna go public at some point. Bessent says TSMC and Taiwan's dominance in chips is a security risk. And Fed Governor Lisa Cook's lawsuit could be filed as soon as today, according to CNBC. Now, beyond just Nvidia earnings, we also had Snowflake, CrowdStrike, HP, Viva, Urban Outfitters, Five Below, Pure Storage, and NetApp that reported today in after hours. Tomorrow is actually going to be a huge day as well. In pre-market, you have Dollar General and Best Buy, Burlington, Bath & Body Works, Dick's Sporting Goods, Ollie's, and some others. Tomorrow in after hours, you're going to have Marvell, Dell, Ulta, Centennial One, Affirm, Gap, Ambarella, Elastic, and Petco. And then Friday pre-market, you will have Alibaba. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to conclude today's episode. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already. Check out that link down below in the description of this video if you would like to come join the trading community. With that said, have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.